Today, I'd like to talk about Saint Vincent de Paul, one of the great saints of the Catholic Church. Vincent was born on April 24th in 1581, and he lived till September 27th, 1660. Born really to a very simple family, a peasant family in Gascony. And he said, well, what should I do to escape these humble roots I come from, this situation, and how can I progress in my life? And so he said, well, maybe the priesthood could be a way to do that. But it costs money at that point to enter into the seminary. So his father, who again didn't have a lot of money, sold the family oxen to pay the fee for Vincent to go to the seminary. He studied at the Faculty of Theology at the University of Toulouse, and it seems that particular uh, university, I guess, reflective of the times. There was a lot of arguments among students, even physical fights that broke out. So it was kind of a wild scene for Vincent. And he wound up paying for some of the fees by tutoring others. He was very gifted academically, did very well in his classes, and so it came easy to him. And so he did help with paying the tuition at that time. After this time, there's this story about him being captured and enslaved for 2 years. Historians go back and forth with regard to the story. Some think it's just made up. Others think it's possible. Um, but really, it seems that this was not, didn't actually take place. But in his priesthood, he does make connections at a very high level in society. And the queen at that time, Queen Anne, asked him to be his spiritual advisor. And he was very helpful in assisting Queen Anne deal with a heresy called Jansenism. And that heresy really took hold in the south of France, very much influenced the Irish church as well. And it was a heresy that really tried to kind of purify and revive the church, but went to certain extremes, particularly with regard to sexuality. Um, and so Vincent was helpful in kind of helping Queen Anne steer away from the excesses of Jansenism. A turning point, though, happened in his life, and we see this in many lives of the saints. We see a time of conversion, and his conversion happened when he was summoned to hear the confession of a dying peasant. And the sincerity of the person's confession, their obvious faith, their trust in God, made a deep impact on the life of Saint Vincent and really changed him. And it's interesting because he had come from kind of humble roots. He had come from peasant stock, and then he had tried to kind of use his priesthood almost as a career path. And he got very well connected with a lot of very influential people. But then that contact with the peasant really opened his eyes to what faith was really all about. Um, he became aware then of the seriousness of his vocation, and certainly being called in this situation where someone is facing death and they're confessing, it shows you the power of the vocation of the priesthood, where people trust you with their life, their faith, what is deepest within them. And he determined after this experience that now his vocation as a priest and his ministry as a priest would not be so much to the wealthy or to establish a career for himself, but really to be of service to the poor. He saw the poor as the heart of his ministry. He saw giving to the poor what his faith really was all about. Through the eyes of this peasant, he got really in touch with who he was, his roots, where he came from, and the importance of reaching out to the poor. So he established a mission congregation. It became later known as the Vincentians, after his first name. In France, it's called the Lazarites. Uh, and really, their whole mission was to assist those who are in need. He also founded a feminine counterpart to this ministry called the Daughters of Charity with Saint Louise de Marillac. And basically, their thrust was similar. They were to serve the poor, but also they took on the mission of helping those who were sick and alleviating their suffering. And he had an interesting expression talking about this particular order, because a lot of times the orders in that day restricted to convents, restricting to praying. Vincent had a different vision. He said their convent is the sick room, their chapel, the parish church, their cloister, the streets of the city. So they were to be an active order, an order that sought out those who were in need and assisted those who were in need. So he wound up founding many hospitals, many orphanages. He was also a pioneer in clerical training, influential in establishing seminaries, kind of to revive the church and to get the church moving in a direction to really help people and minister to people, and to give those who are studying for the priesthood the necessary pastoral skills to reach out to those who were in need, and to help those who were in need of sometimes physical comfort, sometimes spiritual comfort, sometimes a combination of the two. He also was very influential in establishing homes for the humane care of the mentally infirm. So, again, in those days, sometimes those who had mental problems were isolated from society. He said, no, they need decent care, they need homes, they need a good life where they can be ministered to and they can be helped. Just because they have this mental illness, they shouldn't be ignored by society. They shouldn't be put off by society. They need our help. They need our assistance. He also ministered to prisoners, so that is a very important ministry, that those who are in prison get the proper care, get the rehabilitative services that they are going to need. Very important in his life. And he also ministered to slaves, to the galley slaves who were brought on the ships. And he ransomed over 1,200 slaves from North Africa. He saw the immorality of this slave trade, and he wanted to do something to assist the slaves and help the slaves. Very interestingly, though, he was very good at getting those to support his projects who were wealthy, who were influential. So he had all of these contacts, and in terms of his ministry, he would reach out to them. And he got that type of reputation where actually people started approaching him and saying, we have this money, do you need it? What projects are you involved in? How can we support you? How can we help you? Which is a real sign that when one is involved in this type of charitable work, it does attract those with a generous spirit. And it's not so much the wealth or the influence that can be a negative as the indifference to those who are in need. And this is what Vincent would do. He would reach out to those and give them the opportunity to support his work and to help those who are in need. The poor basically accepted him as one of their own. They felt comfortable with him. They felt he wasn't looking down on them. They felt accepted by him. And so he could walk among them and really establish this bond, this tremendous bond with them, which was beautiful. And his whole spirituality was based on encountering Jesus, but encountering Jesus in the needs of others. not encountering Jesus in any abstract way, but in a very real and personal way, in ministering to their needs. That's where he found Jesus. He saw Jesus alive in them, and he responded to that with his whole heart in giving them his attention, his love, and his caring. And he has a beautiful expression about that. He says, "The poor are your masters, and you are their servants." Sometimes we look at it, the other way. The poor, well, we're masters over the poor, we're better than the poor, we've achieved more than the poor. He said, no, you're getting it wrong. The poor are the ones, they're the masters. You're there to serve them, not to bring what you think they need, but to genuinely listen to them, to serve them, to reach out to them. And he says, if God is the center of your life, no words are necessary. Your mere presence will touch hearts. Because many times we get in this bind where, gee, how can I help somebody? What can I do? And Vincent has a good insight here. He's like, don't worry about that. Just be present. Just be there. Get to know them. Bond with them. Become one with them. And then, you'll see where that will go. And so Vincent becomes a great example for us of ministering to others and seeing others as a reflection of Jesus.